Yeah, Max Keiser, welcome to the Keiser Report. So, the 1% is tired of being criticized. Stacy Herbert, tell us more.
Bah! Humbug. That's this episode of the Keiser Report, Max. You seem genuinely scared there. Bankers join billionaires to debunk imbecile attack on top 1%. So a group has been formed by Bernard Marcus, 82, co-founder of Home Depot, called Job Creators Alliance. He says if successful business people don't go public to share their stories and talk about their troubles, they deserve what they're going to get. When he was asked if he was worried about speaking out might make him the target of protesters, he said, "Who gives a crap about some imbecile? Are you kidding me?"
Well, this is a story about people who are subsidized by either the government or by becoming wealthy by ignoring what are called economic externalities. Now, in the case of Home Depot, they recently took the advice from, I believe it was Rainforest Alliance, about sourcing wood from endangered forests. But that's a recent development. For the entire growth period of the company, they sourced wood from unsustainable areas, thus raping the globe of much-needed wood and trees to make this guy wealthy. So he's a forest rapist.
Well, you know, Home Depot has a very good model. It was a model that was tried by other people and it failed. However, this group are claiming to be job creators, but in fact, the likes of a Home Depot or a Walmart in particular destroy 5 jobs, perhaps, for every 1 job they create in America. But they can still point to that 1 job and say, you know, at least we didn't destroy 6 jobs. We only destroyed 5.
Yeah, well, let me cut in, because Home Depot was one of the first so-called category killers, where they were able to focus on one area within the retailing and build that out and leverage that one area and put thousands and thousands of mom and pops out of business, as you were just pointing out. And in so doing, they distort the entire fabric of these economies, thus leading to the social unrest that we now have.
But it's also attracted, of course, many, many, many bankers who are just there on top of an organization. They're managing the company. It's not rocket science. It's not innovation. It's not creating any real wealth or jobs for the industry. They have John A. Allison IV. That should tell you what silver spoon was born in his mouth, a director of BB&T Corporation, the 9th largest U.S. bank. He said, quote, "Instead of an attack on the 1%, let's call it an attack on the very productive. This attack is destructive."
They're not productive. They are essentially parasites on the overall economy. And when their incredibly narrow-focused businesses collapse, as they invariably do, and Home Depot practically went out of business a few years ago because they were too narrowly focused, then the government bails them out. So again, are they productive? No, they're parasites with a bailout.
Yeah, but I'm talking about bankers here. Home Depot, that's one story. Let's put that to the side. Let's talk about the bankers here who are allying themselves to these guys who actually run companies and businesses that sell and produce things. Here are bankers who have, over the last 2 or 3 decades, been responsible for one of the grossest misallocations of capital in the history of capitalism. Now, that is an utter failure of the job just because they were able to steal, to hollow out the economy and steal lots of money, basically, from the fabric of society. That doesn't make them somehow geniuses.
Right. Well, the financialization of all business in America by bankers, as you point out. This Home Depot is essentially a bank. General Motors is a bank. Sears is a hedge fund. You know, Exxon is a bank. Yes, these are banks and hedge funds parading around as companies that do something other than just engage in financialization.
And then finally on this story, asked if he were willing to pay more taxes in a November 30th interview with Bloomberg Television, Blackstone Group CEO Steven Schwartzman spoke about lower-income U.S. families who pay no income tax. He said, "You have to have skin in the game. I'm not saying how much people should do, but we should all be part of the system." Schwartzman himself only pays 15% capital gains tax on his wealth.
Schwartzman's a pig. You know, I followed his career for 20 years. He just is a guy who does a lot of deals using borrowed money, that he has no risk in the game. He says, oh, these people need to have skin in the game. He himself, Schwartzman, has 0 skin in the game because it's all borrowed money at rates near 0. Whenever he makes a mistake, he gets bailed out. You need to get a real job, Schwartzman, and stop blah, 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 your mouth in public because you're a disgrace.
Yeah, but, Max, The U.S. is an empire based on the military and wars all around the world at the moment. And who has more skin in the game than the very poor? Name me one of Schwartzman's children that have served in the U.S. military. Name me one of John A. Allison IV's children who have served in the military, put more skin in the game for supporting this lifestyle that they have thanks to the world's reserve currency backed by the world's biggest ever military operating machine.
So, when talking about Schwartzman, aside from being, or on top of being an overrated businessman, he's also a coward.
Well, many of the top 1% are. And so let's see just how good the billionaires are. Breakthrough malaria vaccine, tantalizingly close. These are the sort of headlines we saw in the last 2 months or so when Bill Gates Foundation and GlaxoSmithKline came up with a new vaccine, they say, RTSS, in order to vaccinate against malaria. Now, 800,000 people die from malaria every year, most of them children and most of them in Africa. But this new vaccination is actually a 30-year-old vaccination that was developed for adults, but it doesn't work on them, so they modified it to work on children. Now, GlaxoSmithKline says that they are going to charge for the cost of production plus 5% profit because they don't want to set a bad precedence that they're just going to give it away.
Right. Well, Bill Gates Foundation, of course, comes out of the crucible that is Microsoft, which is a twice convicted predatory monopolist and copyright and intellectual property terrorist. So he's taking all what he learned from that business and bringing it over to global drug business, which is already rife with copyright abuse and trademark abuse. So why would you have a twice convicted predatory monopolist, running the global health services for this huge profit? Unless, of course, you're delusional.
Well, more importantly, according to doctors, like the head of Doctors Without Borders, a vaccine that works only half the time is not a shot in the arm malaria needs. Anything lower than 70% in terms of immunity is considered a failure. And in this case, Doctors Without Borders are saying that it actually is only immunizing 30% of children against severe malaria, the form that kills.
No, Bill Gates needs to inoculate himself against himself.
But it also goes with what you see happening. So we started the show with all these bankers claiming that they're the victims. But they have such a powerful seat. They have so much power that they could sit down with Obama and dictate what the policy is so that they are not victims of the bottom 99%. Here we have the same thing, that since Bill Gates became involved in malaria, $10 billion has been donated and dedicated to the fight against malaria. This is a 100-fold increase in the last 10 years. But it's going to a business model applied to a situation which is not very good because, listen, infection surge raises doubts over Gates' plan to beat malaria. So reduced immunity and mosquitoes growing resistance to insecticide is blamed. So the mosquitoes are already developing resistance to all the stuff being used. The usual pattern for youngsters in Central Africa near the equator where malaria is concentrated is to suffer repeated infections throughout childhood, which, provided they survive them, gradually builds up their immunity. So most adults get up to 6 cases of malaria a year, but it's just like having a flu.
Right. So here you have Bill Gates coming in there trying to turn a business or a job that would require X number of dollars, but make it so that it requires 100 times more dollars to justify his enormous fees and his institution's fees and all the people supporting him and their fees. So they've taken the bloated banking model and applied it to health. So they're taking one model in the banking industry that's proven to be catastrophe, and they say, well, let's move it into the drug business because it works so well in the banking business. Let's create a global pharmaceutical business that's equally failing like the bank business, and we'll have this twice convicted predatory monopolist run it. Wow.
It is also, Bill Gates is involved with Monsanto, which has the Terminator seeds, which of course means they can't reproduce every year, so farmers can't save the seeds to just replant for free the following year. The same thing with this vaccine is you have to do it every single year. So they haven't said what the cost will be, and they refuse to tell what the cost will be. So of course, even $1, they say, will be too much for most African nations anyway.
Well, that's why groups like the Swedish Pirate Party are an attempt to inoculate the world against the types like Bill Gates, because he has a view of private property and intellectual property which goes completely against anything nearing free market capitalism or free markets at all. It's all about monopoly pricing. So the Swedish Pirate Party and other pirate parties and the pirate movement are needed as a counterbalance to the destructive elements that are Bill Gates.
Yeah, so here you have a case where the policies being used are actually end up killing more people, because while the malaria goes away, it sinks by up to 90% when measures are first introduced. But then it comes back after 2 years even stronger and wipes out more people just because they don't have immunity.
All right, let me get this straight. You're saying that they've increased the cost by a factor of 100, and net, more people are dying from malaria.
No, I'm saying it's a misallocation of capital. There's $10 billion worth of money of people wanting to do good. They see this man, Bill Gates, who gets on CNN, he gets on CNBC, he gets on MSNBC, he gets on Fox, and they say he's a good man, he's a benevolent billionaire. This is what he's doing. And so all that $10 billion of capital goes to him because they think he's a good man. He might think he's doing well within his own framework of life, which is through the patent and copyright cartel. He thinks he's doing good. But in fact, the evidence on the ground is suggesting it's actually harming, doing more harm than good. But he himself is his own cult of thinking, I, Bill Gates, care about these people and want to save them. It doesn't mean that it is saving them, but this $10 billion of capital that would have been available to maybe drain the swamps or do something different, that is instead all going towards this patent and copyright cartel.
Yeah. Well, didn't Singapore just go out there and kill all the mosquitoes? And now they don't have malaria.
Well, we can never defeat those little critters. So finally here on people wanting to do well, Kenya's Samburu people violently evicted after U.S. charities buy land. So members of the Samburu people in Kenya have been abused, beaten, and raped by police after the land that they lived on for 2 decades was sold to 2 U.S.-based wildlife charities, a rights group and community leader have alleged. Of course, these 2 charities want to do good. They have bought this land thinking, like, here's this capital, we've raised it, we want to help people in Africa and starving people around the world. We want to save these forests from being chopped down. So they bought the land and gave it to the government. However, there are tribes that have been living there. They've just been forced off the land, and they've been beaten and raped, including by the police, and 3 people have been killed.
Well, they suffer from wealth blindness. When you achieve a certain quantity of wealth, you become blind to other human beings, and the act of chopping them down and murdering them doesn't factor in your conscience. And this is why Bill Gates does what he does, and this is why what the story you just described occurs as it does.
But it's also command and control environment you see everywhere. The likes of Steven Schwartzman have a command and control solution for the financial crisis. Bill Gates has a command and control solution for the malaria crisis. And now, policy all across Africa, where it is killing almost 1 million people a year, malaria, they're basically having the UN and World Health Organization force Bill Gates' solution upon them.
Right. So it's anything but free markets and capitalism. It's dictatorships, monopoly value, and top-down hierarchical approach to problems and command and control. All right. Well, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away. Much more coming your way, so stay right there.